Welcome, dear listener, wherever you are and whenever you've chosen to tune in. I invite you to take a deep breath and let your mind settle into stillness. Tonight we begin a journey through stone, time, and memory. A journey that asks a question as vast as the stones themselves. What if the ancient stonework scattered across our world was not merely the product of human hands, but the remnants of a technology far older and far stranger than we imagine? Before we begin, I warmly invite you to join this community by liking and subscribing. And as you listen, perhaps you might share in the comments where you are listening from and at what time of day or night. It is a small way of connecting across distance as we reflect together on mysteries that stretch across millennia. Now, let us begin. When we look at the world's oldest monuments, something stirs within us. The cyclopean walls of Saxe, Woman in Peru, the immense blocks of Baalbek in Lebanon, the pyramids rising from Gizeh's desert, and the enigmatic stone heads of Easter Island. These structures speak in silence. They carry the weight of endurance, of design, of purpose, yet they also whisper riddles. How were they made? Why were they shaped with such precision? And what knowledge was required to set them in place? For generations, archaeologists, engineers, and dreamers alike have stood before these stones in awe. They are massive, some weighing hundreds of tons, quarried from places miles away, dragged, lifted, and aligned with astonishing accuracy. Even today, with our cranes and laser-guided instruments, the feats are difficult to replicate, which leaves us with a question that reaches beyond tools and labor. Were these works merely the triumphs of human ingenuity, or do they point to something else? Something we do not yet understand. In the quiet of the night, when the distractions of daily life fade, these stones invite us to imagine. Perhaps they were not only monuments, but machines. Not merely walls, but circuits. Not solely temples, but resonators, built to channel energy, amplify sound, or connect with forces that remain hidden from our modern science. To see them this way is to open a door between geology and technology, between earth and sky, between the known and the mysterious. Consider the peculiar marks on certain megaliths, grooves that do not resemble chisel strokes, surfaces that appear smoothed or molded, as if the stone had once been softened like clay, joints so precise that a knife blade cannot slip between them. These details raise questions not only about skill, but about method. Did our ancestors wield a forgotten science, a way of working with matter at the molecular level? If so, where did it come from? Was it born from centuries of experimentation? Or was it given, taught, shared by visitors who did not belong entirely to this world? If the latter sounds too strange, pause and remember that every age has its mysteries. Electricity, when first discovered, was invisible and incomprehensible. The structure of atoms, the bending of light, the power of gravity itself, these forces were once unthinkable. To those living in the Stone Age, would not a single spark from a modern lighter seem like magic? Might it be the same for us now, standing before the megaliths, blind to the principles that shaped them? At the heart of this reflection are the gentle but profound thought: what if stone was not just material, but medium? What if these ancient builders, whether human or otherwise, understood that stone could store energy, conduct vibration, or hold memory in ways we are only beginning to rediscover? Quartz, after all, is used in modern clocks and radios, vibrating with remarkable stability. Granite contains quartz, and many sacred sites are built upon granite foundations. Coincidence or design? We look at the alignments of these sites with stars, solstices, and equinoxes. They seem to bind earth to sky, as if the builders were weaving a fabric of resonance between human life and the cosmos. This blending of stone, energy, and celestial order suggests not only architecture, but a kind of living science, a technology of harmony. Yet, there is also humility in acknowledging how little we know. The stones do not shout their secrets. They wait, silent, patient, enduring across floods, earthquakes, and the rise and fall of empires. Perhaps their survival is itself a message, While our glass towers and digital networks may one day crumble to dust, stone remains, and within its entrance, it holds a memory of hands, intentions, and possibly something more. The question of alien technology is not meant as a final answer, but as an opening. It does not demand belief, only wonder. What if, in some forgotten chapter of Earth's history, knowledge arrived from elsewhere, knowledge that guided early societies, taught them to see stone not as dead matter, but as a bridge to energy, to the stars, to the universe itself. As we settle into this exploration, let us carry both awe and curiosity, awe at the sheer magnitude of these works, curiosity at the possibility that they represent more than shelter or worship. The stones stand as riddles, waiting for us to slow down, to look again, and to listen not just with our eyes, but with the quiet within us. Tonight, as we begin this series of reflections, imagine yourself walking among those vast stones. Feel the weight of them, not only on the earth, but in your mind. Imagine that they are humming, vibrating, speaking in a language beyond words, and imagine that if you could hear them clearly, they might tell you that the universe itself is alive, and that once, long ago, someone knew how to converse with it. If we begin with the stones themselves, we notice something striking. They are not merely large, they are chosen. Builders across cultures selected specific kinds of rock, granite, basalt, limestone, each with its own density, resonance, and durability. It was as if the choice of stone mattered beyond appearance. Granite, for example, is rich in quartz. Quartz vibrates when exposed to pressure or electricity. It is the same principle that makes quartz crystals keep time in modern watches. Basalt is volcanic, formed in the deep heat of the earth, dense and dark, carrying within it the memory of fire. Limestone, softer yet resilient, reflects sound, shaping the acoustics of chambers carved within it. The builders did not quarry at random. They carried blocks across mountains and valleys, as though they sought not only strength, but qualities hidden in the stone itself. At Giza, the Great Pyramid contains millions of limestone blocks, but its inner chambers are built of granite hauled from quarries nearly 500 miles away. Why go to such lengths? Was it symbolic, ritual, or practical? Perhaps all three. Yet if we consider stone not only as structure, but as material with energy potential, the choice begins to feel deliberate, like selecting components for a vast machine. Other sites echo this pattern. At Baalbek, the trilithon stones each weigh more than 1,000 tons, resting on a foundation of massive blocks, so precise that even earthquakes have failed to shift them. At Sacsayhuaman, walls curve and lock together like pieces of an intricate puzzle, resisting time and tremors alike. The more closely one looks, the more it feels as if the stones were engineered to last, as though Endurance itself was part of the design. Yet Endurance has another dimension. These monuments do not merely survive, they transmit. They shape how sound travels, how light filters, how space feels. The echo inside the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid is not accidental. The acoustics at Stonehenge create resonance when drums or voices fill the air. The statues on Easter Island are buried deeper than most realize, their hidden bodies anchoring them like antennae. This interplay of form and function invites us to see the works not only as symbols, but as instruments. The question then emerges, were these instruments of ritual, designed to bring communities together in song and ceremony? Or were they instruments of something more, tools that connected human beings to earth and sky, amplifying signals we no longer know how to read? To imagine this is not to leap into speculation, but to notice how patterns repeat. Across continents and centuries, builders returned again and again to the same principles: massive scale, celestial alignment, acoustic resonance, durability beyond imagination. It is as though they shared a blueprint. If so, where did that blueprint come from? Was it the slow accumulation of human trial and error? Or was there a guiding hand, a knowledge passed down from an earlier time or from a source beyond human memory? When we stand before these works today, our minds reach for comparison. In our world, We build servers to hold data, satellites to send signals, power grids to carry energy. What if the ancients did something similar, only with stone? What if their monuments stored information, transmitted vibrations, or connected with fields we have yet to rediscover? Even the weathering of stone tells a story. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, pillars carved with animals and symbols stand as the world's earliest known temple, predating agriculture. Some of the carvings appear to map constellations, linking sky to earth. Erosion at sites like the Sphinx suggests water damage far older than mainstream history allows. If the timelines shift, our understanding of human capacity shifts with them. If these structures are older than we think, then perhaps the knowledge behind them stretches further too. Science reminds us that memory can exist outside the brain. Crystals, fields, and systems hold patterns, repeating them across time. Perhaps stone holds memory in a way we have yet to decipher. Not memory in words or pictures, but in vibration, geometry, and energy. If so, the great works of stone be less monuments to the past than keys to a continuity we have forgotten. To walk among these sites is to feel two truths at once. On one hand, they are utterly human, carved, lifted, placed with sweat and determination. On the other, they feel more than human, enduring, precise, aligned with cosmos and earth in ways that surpass simple survival. This tension between the human and the other than human is what stirs the imagination. Perhaps it is not an either-or, but a partnership. Human hands working with knowledge that came from elsewhere. The deeper we reflect, the more we see how fragile our assumptions are. We assume progress is linear, that we know more than those who came before. Yet the stones stand as quiet counterpoints, suggesting that ancient knowledge may not have been less advanced, only different. A different kind of science, rooted not in circuits and engines, but in resonance and form. As the night deepens, imagine these sites alive with activity. Priests chanting inside resonant chambers, stars reflected in pools of water aligned with pyramids, communities gathered in sound and rhythm, their voices amplified by stones, designed to carry vibration. It feels both familiar and foreign, both earthly and cosmic. And in that in-between space, the question lingers. What if the stones themselves are the last surviving fragments of an ancient technology, a technology not lost but waiting for us to listen again? What if the stones themselves are the last surviving fragments of an ancient technology, a technology not lost but waiting for us to listen again? To pursue that possibility is to look for the human forms that could have carried such knowledge across generations. Technology does not spring from single minds in isolation. It is practiced in hands, taught in workshops, preserved in ritual, and hidden in the small conservancies of specialized makers. When we study the great monuments, we should also imagine the schools, the guilds, the lineages of masons and priests who tended knowledge the way gardeners tend an orchard. These traditions would not have been written only in tablets. They would have been encoded in gestures, in songs, in the rhythm of tools, in apprenticeship rites that prohibited casual disclosure. In many cultures, craft knowledge is guarded. Apprentices learn by doing, by repetition, by copying the master's movement until muscle remembers what memory cannot. A single technique can survive in the way a tune survives, altered, but recognizably the same across time and distance. Suppose, then, that there were centers where such techniques were conserved and transmitted. Traveling masters, maritime networks, pilgrim architects might have carried templates of proportion and method from one coast to another. The recurrence of similar forms and alignments at sites thousands of miles apart begins to feel less like accident and more like an echo of distributed craft. We can imagine portable workshops, wooden frames and templates that encoded dimensions, lines scratched on bone or copper used as measuring standards, simple devices, plumb bobs, sighting rods, and graduated cords, passed from hand to hand. Such tools do not survive as grand monuments do. They rot and melt away, but their principles can survive embedded within the stones themselves. A wall that fits to a hair might be the final sentence of a conversation that began with a chord and the chant sung to measure out units of length. The measure can be ritualized so that the song ensures consistent spacing and the eye, trained by centuries, avoids error. There is another vector of memory, geometry as language. Geometry does more than describe. It prescribes. A ratio, once understood, can be repeated indefinitely. The same proportional rule that placed a chamber in Giza could have been applied, in different form, on the far side of an ocean. The Pythagorean relationship, simple and stubborn, is the sort of thing that lasts, where we find repeated ratios and repeated uses of right angles and circles. We find the fingerprints of a mind that thought in form. If that mind traveled, its grammar of shape could be spoken in stone. Beyond tools and proportional rules, there are methods that leave subtle marks. The surfaces of some megaliths suggest abrasion with hard sands and repeated polishing. Microstriations are the signatures of technique. The marks are faint, under layers of dust and lichen, but they endure. Where archaeologists have examined such surfaces under microscopes, they find evidence of long, controlled processes, rather than hurried hammering. That economy of force suggests an approach that was measured, procedural, and repeatable. Repeatability is the word of technology. It implies method, not miracle. Still, method can itself rest on uncommon principles. Consider the deep relationship between stone and vibration. Quartz-rich rocks respond to pressure and to electrical and mechanical stress in subtle ways. When stone is cut, filled, and joined with certain geometries, it may carry standing waves. When sound is introduced into a chamber, the ancients were intimately acquainted with sound. Drums, chants, and resonant spaces feature heavily in ritual life. Spaces that focus or amplify sound can alter perception, induce trance, and coordinate communal activity. An acoustically tuned chamber could function as both instrument and archive. It would store a pattern in sound, available only to those who knew how to call it. Experiments in archaeoacoustics have shown that particular caves and carved chambers accentuate certain frequencies. Voices and low tones behave differently in stone than in timber or tent. A deep note might bloom within a gallery and die elsewhere. If builders intentionally exploited these properties, the monuments become a kind of analog processor. They do not compute like silicon. They shape waves. They tune attention. They could have been used for ritual purposes that had practical effects, synchronizing labor, encoding measures of time by sound, or even transmitting signals across a landscape by coordinated sonic events. Such uses are modest compared with modern fantasies, yet no less sophisticated. On the geological side, the choice of quarry matters. Builders often sought out specific bedrock, not merely for strength but for character. A granite seam with a high quartz content, a basalt flow cooled into columnar joints, a limestone with uniform bedding. Each presents a different palette of mechanical and acoustic properties. Quarrying such stone would have been a deliberate selection process shaped by experience. That experience can accumulate into rules, the kind of rules a culture preserves and guards jealously. When a community departs or a social rupture occurs, those rules may be lost. The stone remains, but the recipe for making it sing would vanish with the last elder. It is tempting to leap from here to mythical notions of imparted knowledge from elsewhere, yet care keeps us modest. The archaeological record shows brilliant adaptation and innovation among peoples who solved practical problems by patient refinement. Ramps, counterweights, lubricated sledges, and coordinated labor can explain many transport problems. Polishing with sand and emery explains many seamless joints. And yet, even when modern teams replicate these feats in controlled experiments, the human cost and the workmanship required are humbling. The apparent simplicity of a single cut belies a long history of refinement. Time is a tool, and long apprenticeship is a form of technology. If there are gaps in our reconstruction, they reveal two things. First, that practical knowledge can be fragile. So much depends on context, seasonal labor cycles, social organization, religious calendars. The right technique may be useless without the social web supporting it. Second, they reveal that knowledge systems can be multimodal. Tradition often blends craft with ritual, technique with taboo. Some methods are restricted to ceremony, and thus are performed only rarely. When they are performed, they are rehearsed within a social script that helps secure their accuracy. Remove the script and the skill drifts. The stones remain. The ritual evaporates. Our modern lens sees only the durable and hails it as inexplicable. There is another modest possibility worth holding. Perhaps some of these techniques encoded information in ways that do not translate to our modern categories. A megalithic alignment might be a map not of celestial coordinates, but of migratory memory. A chamber's resonance might be intended to evoke specific physiological states that aid in group cohesion or memory retention. In that case, the technology is less an engine and more a pedagogy, ways of shaping human perception, so that knowledge is easier to transmit, encode, and retrieve. That idea sits comfortably between stone and story. It remains humble and powerful. As we consider the long arc of human craft, we must also respect the surprising continuity of some practices. Stonecutters in remote regions today reproduce jointing techniques that echo ancient methods. In a world of rapid change, such craft continuity is a long ladder linking past hands to present ones. To climb it, we need patience, experimental work, and a willingness to learn in situ. The stones, after all, are patient teachers. They will not hurry us. They require that we stand, observe, and try again. So perhaps the best stance is both skeptical and open. Many feats attributed to lost marvels can be explained by human ingenuity, amplified by community, ritual, and long apprenticeship. At the same time, there remains an invitation in the stones to study their materiality with humility, to measure their acoustics, to test their proportions, to seek the living tradition in the last makers who still remember. For if technologies simply organize knowledge, then it may lie ready for recovery, not in fantastical sources, but in the careful marriage of archaeology, experimental craft, and reverent listening. If we listen to the stones long enough, we may find that the divide between human and other than human technology was never absolute. It was instead a cultural continuum in which people learned to shape matter and perception together. That continuum might not give us overnight miracles. It may offer something quieter and more useful, methods for living in tune with the earth, tools that last, and a memory that survives the fragile sweep of empires. If resonance was the foundation of ancient knowledge, then each monument was not just an object, but a participant in a planetary dialogue. The ancients may have understood stone not as material, but as medium. Each surface, each joint, each hollow space was tuned to the frequencies of the earth itself. In this way, architecture became both archive and instrument. Across the world, traces of this understanding remain. In Egypt, the great halls of Karnak echo with tones that linger longer than sound should. In Malta, the hypogeum resonates in low frequencies that affect the human body, slowing heartbeats and deepening breath. And in South America, at Sacsayhuaman, the precisely interlocked stones hum faintly when the wind moves through the valley. These are not accidents. They are the remnants of a science that spoke in vibration. Imagine walking among these stones not as a tourist, but as a student of the ancient craft. The way light enters at certain angles, the way air shifts as you pass. These details would not be decoration. They would be language. Every pattern of stone was an equation made tangible. Every wall a theorem expressed through weight and texture. To live within such spaces was to live within knowledge itself. Some modern researchers have begun exploring the concept of archaeoacoustics, the study of sound within ancient structures. When tones are played inside these spaces, certain frequencies cause entire chambers to vibrate. In some cases, the human voice alone is enough to awaken the stone. The ancients, it seems, knew precisely how to carve in order to make matter sync. And if sound could move stone, perhaps stone could also move thought. In our age, we think of technology as mechanical or digital, but to earlier civilizations, it may have been biological and environmental. The boundary between mind and matter was thinner. To them, a temple was a body, and a human was an extension of that structure. The vibrations that filled the halls were not entertainment or ritual alone, they were calibration, a tuning of spirit to the natural order. If this sounds poetic, consider that modern physics describes reality as a field of oscillations. Every atom vibrates, every force has a frequency. To shape matter is to shape rhythm. The ancients may have reached this conclusion through experience rather than experiment, through observation rather than formula. They lived surrounded by cycles: the sun, the moon, the seasons, the pulse of the tide. In time, they learned to build in imitation of those rhythms, to harmonize with the cosmic clock. As centuries passed, the purpose of this knowledge shifted. Kings replaced keepers. What was once a practice of harmony became a symbol of authority. The great stones, once placed for resonance, were stacked for spectacle. Yet even in these later works, the echoes of the old ways remained. The alignments, the materials, the angles, they still whispered of balance, even when the builders no longer remembered the song. Perhaps that is the tragedy and beauty of human civilization. We build beyond our understanding, and in doing so, we preserve fragments of truths we have forgotten. Each age interprets the same stones differently. To one, they are tombs. To another, temples. To us, they are mysteries. But the stones themselves have not changed. Only our perception of them has. In some quiet sense, these ancient builders achieved what no machine has yet done. They created structures that still function after thousands of years, even when their original purpose has faded from memory. The vibrations that move through them today are the same that moved through them at their creation. They remain in tune with the earth, not through maintenance, but through equilibrium. And so the question deepens: if resonance was once the language of the world, then silence may be its memory. Perhaps the ancients did not seek to command the planet, but to converse with it, to leave behind not messages for the eye, but frequencies for the soul. When we stand among their monuments, we may not understand their words, but we can still feel their tone. The story of ancient stonework is not one of lost power. It is one of enduring harmony. The ancients may have built not to dominate, but to remind, to say, through the patient language of stone, remember what it feels like to belong. To belong was once the measure of wisdom. The ancients seemed to know that a civilization's entrance was not built upon conquest or possession, but upon alignment. Their monuments were not random expressions of grandeur. They followed invisible geometries, relationships between earth and sky, proportion and pulse. Modern archaeology sees measurements, but the ancients may have seen meaning. The angles of pyramids, the curves of columns, the precise intervals between monoliths, these were not merely artistic choices. They were responses to forces that shaped the natural world. Geometry was the grammar of existence. To carve a line into stone was to echo the movement of stars. The builders of these structures worked in ways that appear impossible to us. Enormous stones cut with machine-like precision, blocks transported across uneven terrain with no trace of mechanical aid. Each piece fits without mortar, yet withstands earthquakes and centuries of erosion. The perfection of fit suggests more than craftsmanship. It suggests understanding. Perhaps they did not fight gravity. Perhaps they used it. By finding harmony between weight, balance, and vibration, they allowed nature itself to lift and settle their creations. To us, this may sound like myth, but to them, it was observation refined through countless generations of listening to the earth. The alignment of ancient monuments often traces invisible networks. Pyramids mirror constellations. Temples point toward solstices. Megalithic circles echo lunar cycles. Each site seems connected, as if built according to a single unbroken vision of the planet. From Egypt to Peru, from the Indus Valley to the British Isles, the same ratios, the same alignments appear again and again. If we strip away the layers of culture, language, and time, we may glimpse the underlying pattern. It is not the pattern of empire or migration, but of comprehension. Humanity, scattered across continents, appears to have shared an intuition that life and cosmos move as one. Their monuments are not messages to the future, but reminders to themselves. There is something humbling in this. For all our machines and satellites, we struggle to build anything that will last more than a few centuries. Our cities grow taller, but not wiser. Our materials are strong, but our meanings are fragile. The ancients built slower. They built for endurance, for participation in the rhythm of time itself. Consider how light moves through ancient sites. At dawn, the first rays slide through narrow corridors to illuminate hidden carvings. At sunset, shadows fall across stones to mark celestial moments. These were not coincidences. They were acts of synchronization. To stand within those walls at the right moment was to stand in alignment with the universe. The ancients may have believed that memory itself required a physical anchor. Ideas could vanish, but stones could hold intention. A temple was a thought made permanent. A monument was an equation inscribed into the earth. Even if the words were lost, the proportion remained. And so they built in proportion, knowing that long after they were gone, the shape would still speak. Perhaps that is why the stones feel alive when you visit them. You can sense a residue of awareness, a faint pulse beneath the surface. The alignment of each angle, the precision of each plane, creates a tension that the body recognizes even when the mind cannot name it. These places do not ask for belief. They invite presence. Science tells us that resonance can preserve patterns long after their source has ceased. A vibration leaves traces. If these structures were built to hold resonance, then perhaps they hold not only sound, but memory itself. When you touch the surface of an ancient wall, you might be feeling the lingering echo of those who built it. Our ancestors seemed to understand that knowledge was not something to possess, but something to inhabit. It was not stored in books or tablets, but in places, rituals, and alignments. They did not separate science from spirit. To measure was to meditate. To calculate was to commune. The sacred and the practical were one. This unity of purpose gave their works a quiet power. A stone aligned to the solstice still performs its function, even when its meaning is forgotten. A pyramid still channels the movement of stars, even when no priest remains to observe it. These monuments are not dependent on memory. They are memory. When modern engineers study these sites, they are often confounded by what they find. The joints are too perfect, the wear too minimal, the design too mathematically precise for the tools known to those eras. Explanations emerge: advanced lost techniques, forgotten materials, natural genius. But perhaps what we call genius was patience, the willingness to observe the world long enough to learn its language. The ancients lived in conversation with time. We live in argument with it. They watched the slow drift of constellations, the subtle tilt of the seasons, the long decay of stone under sun and rain. We measure time in moments. They measured it in movements. And perhaps, by doing so, they achieved something we have not: continuity. The geometry they practiced was not a tool of dominance, but of dialogue. Circles, triangles, spirals, each was a metaphor for something more than shape. The circle was eternity, the triangle, balance, the spiral, growth and return. To carve such symbols into stone was to declare faith in the permanence of cycles. In this way, the monuments of the ancient world are more than relics. They are reflections. When we gaze upon them, we are not only looking backward, we are seeing what humanity becomes when it aligns itself with nature instead of resisting it. The stones do not ask us to marvel at them. They ask us to remember ourselves. And perhaps, if we learn to listen again, we might rediscover the same harmony they once knew, the geometry that connects the pulse of the human heart to the rotation of the stars. If there is a geometry that binds heart to cosmos, then perhaps the ancients did not build merely to honor the heavens, but to remember how to feel their rhythm. The pulse they followed was not metaphorical, it was real. The vibration of the planet, the subtle tremor beneath all life, the low hum that joins ocean to crust and mountain to air. Modern instruments have confirmed what ancient intuition already knew. The earth resonates. It vibrates at a frequency so deep that the human ear cannot hear it. Yet the human body, in stillness, can sometimes sense it. It is a rhythm that steadies breath, slows thought, and draws the nervous system toward calm. The ancients may have called it spirit, we call it resonance, but both names point to the same thing: the continuity of energy through time. If their monuments were built in alignment with this pulse, then the act of standing within them was a kind of tuning. The stones, vast and precisely arranged, could have amplified or stabilized these frequencies, creating environments where body and planet were briefly synchronized. It was not worship, it was participation. We tend to think of technology as something new, but what if technology, at its most advanced, is simply the art of participation? The ancients, lacking engines or circuits, may have mastered the physics of belonging. Instead of forcing nature to serve their needs, they learned to adjust themselves to its current. A civilization that listens more than it demands leaves behind harmony rather than ruin. Archaeologists have long debated whether certain stones were chosen for their acoustic properties. Some chambers produce perfect resonance when a tone is sung or struck. Others amplify whispers into music. These effects could have been accidental, or they could have been deliberate, part of a tradition that understood sound as structure, and structure as sound. Imagine a ceremony not of spectacle but of vibration. A slow chant rising through the columns of a temple, the air thick with tone, the body becoming instrument, each participant not performer, but vessel for the resonance that travels through the earth. In such moments, the line between inner and outer world dissolves. One no longer prays to the cosmos, one prays with it. This idea may seem poetic, yet physics gives it grounding. Every structure, every object, vibrates according to its form. Change the shape, and you change the sound. The ancients carved their monuments to speak in frequencies that matched the world around them. In doing so, they may have created spaces that supported stability, just in structure, but in mind. Stone was their medium, sound their message, and memory their purpose. Each strike of the chisel carried intent. Each curve of the wall was calculated to hold a note, a whisper, a hum that would continue long after the voice had gone silent. The persistence of those vibrations buried in the very grain of the material might be why so many ancient sites still feel alive. When we walk among them, we sense the residue of meaning, not because we know their stories, but because our bodies recognize their rhythm. The geometry, the balance, the repetition, it calms the nervous system, slows the pulse. The builders may have known that to survive chaos, one must create stillness. This stillness is not absence, it is awareness. The same awareness that allowed them to watch stars shift over centuries, to track solstices with precision, to anticipate floods and seasons by reading the sky. They observed without haste, and in return, the world revealed its pattern. We, by contrast, move too fast to notice pattern. We see the stone, but not the silence it holds. We hear the facts, but not the tone behind them. Our science measures, but rarely listens. And yet, when modern researchers record the resonant frequencies of ancient sites, they find order. Ratios that echo the harmonics of the planet itself. The earth hums in sympathy with the structures built upon it. It is as if the stones themselves remember how to listen. Perhaps this is the true legacy of the ancients, not lost technology, not alien intervention, but the refined art of listening. Listening so deeply that the boundaries between human thought and natural law begin to dissolve. The builder and the built become reflections of each other. The temple becomes both instrument and echo. In the end, their monuments do not speak of superiority. They speak of participation, of knowing that to change the world, one must first move in rhythm with it. The pyramids, the terraces, the carved stones, they were less about reaching for the heavens and more about rooting into the pulse beneath. There is a lesson there, one we have yet to fully learn. For all our tools, our data, our reach beyond the atmosphere, we remain uneasy within our own resonance. We build quickly but forget why. We connect across oceans but seldom align within ourselves. The ancients remind us that connection begins with attunement, that stability comes not from control, but from coherence. The hum beneath our feet has not changed. The same pulse that guided their builders still moves through mountains and rivers. It waits patiently for us to notice. When the wind moves across an ancient wall, When light meets stone, at the same angle it did thousands of years ago, the geometry awakens for an instant, not as superstition, but as science rendered sacred. For a brief moment, the rhythm returns, and the line between the human and the cosmic disappears once again. And in that vanishing line, we glimpse what they knew, that to belong is not to possess, but to harmonize. When harmony becomes the measure of life, stone is no longer seen as dead matter. It becomes memory incarnate. The ancients may have known this not in metaphor, but in practice. For to carve stone is to fix vibration into permanence. To align it with the stars is to inscribe it into time itself. Each temple, each monolith, each wall that still stands after millennia may hold more than form. It may hold an echo of consciousness, not thought as we understand it, but awareness distributed through structure. A kind of remembering that outlives speech. The very minerals in the rock, shaped by heat, pressure, and eons of transformation, are capable of storing energy. They hum faintly with the record of their creation. If one listens closely, perhaps this is what ancient builders heard: the quiet intelligence of matter, the patient awareness of something that does not move quickly, yet never forgets. Modern science tells us that quartz, found in many sacred sites, can store and transmit information, that it responds to vibration, to light, to pressure. It is used in our watches, our computers, our satellites. But long before circuits, the ancients placed quartz deep within their monuments, not as ornament, as instrument. Were they recording, communicating, or simply aligning human presence with geological rhythm? The answer may not matter as much as the intention itself, the recognition that the world is not inert, that even the stillest object participates in the ongoing song of existence. Imagine the scene: a group of builders in a high desert, lifting massive stones not through force alone, but through understanding of balance and tone. The strike of copper tools rings out like bells. The sound echoes across the valley. It is not random. Each strike is part of a rhythm, a pattern that unites the workers in cadence. Their movements become music. The structure rises to that same beat, and in its completion, the vibration remains, humming quietly within the walls, a fossilized song. Perhaps this is what we mistake for mystery. We look at these monuments and see impossibility, yet what if their true brilliance lies not in what they moved, but in what they heard? A civilization that listened deeply enough to shape the invisible into form. The ancients may not have drawn a line between architecture and philosophy, between engineering and prayer. For them, to build was to believe. The placement of each block was both geometry and gratitude. The structure was not only a monument to gods, but a message to the earth itself. We remember you. We move with you. Our modern perspective, driven by analysis and replication, often misses the subtlety of such acts. We see precision, and we assume calculation. But precision can also come from intimacy, from centuries of patient observation, from knowing, by feel, how the world bends and breathes. The builders may not have needed equations. Their formula was participation. Over time, erosion softened their work, but not its meaning. The faces of the stones are worn smooth, yet their placement endures. They still catch the sun as they once did. They still mark the solstices and equinoxes. They still hum when the wind moves through them. It is as if the monuments remain awake, waiting for us to remember how to listen. Some researchers call this geomancy, the art of understanding the energy of place. Others see it as architecture designed for acoustics or astronomy. But all these interpretations touch only fragments of a larger idea, that the ancients viewed the planet itself as a living partner. They didn't conquer nature, they collaborated with it. This collaboration extended beyond design. It informed their myths, their rituals, their sense of time. The alignment of temples mirrored the alignment of the soul. A person who lived in disharmony with the world was considered ill, not morally, but vibrationally. Healing meant returning to resonance, to find balance within the greater rhythm. We can still sense this when we stand before their ruins. Something shifts in the air, a hush that doesn't come from silence, but from recognition. The body understands what the mind cannot translate. It feels the memory stored in the stone, the enduring calm of something that has seen ages pass without fear. Even as centuries eroded their meaning, the resonance remained. Perhaps that was the point. Words fade, languages vanish, civilizations rise and fall, but vibration endures. A frequency, once established, can echo indefinitely through space and material. In that way, these structures are less monuments than instruments, still playing the original tone long after their makers have gone. The modern world builds higher, faster, louder, but few of our creations are designed to last beyond a century. The ancients built for eternity. They chose materials and forms that would survive flood, fire, empire, and forgetfulness, and so they have. Their music continues. If we view their work through this lens, it changes the question entirely. Instead of asking how they built these structures, perhaps we should ask why they built them to endure. Asterisk. What message were they sending, across time, through stone, to whoever might stand here millennia later? Perhaps it was simple. Remember harmony. Remember that the same vibration that moves through stone moves through you. Remember that technology is not only what you invent, but what you align with. Remember that the earth speaks in frequencies of patience. If alien hands had guided them, as some propose, perhaps those beings were not from other stars, but from other epochs. Human ancestors who learned the ancient art of resonance and left behind the record of that understanding. A reminder, not of power, but of participation. And perhaps that is all this has ever been, a story of memory, not of machines or miracles, but of the quiet intelligence of matter, waiting for us to recognize it again. The stones remember, and through them, the earth whispers its oldest truth, that everything lasting is built not through force, but through rhythm. If rhythm is the foundation of endurance, then consciousness itself may be a rhythm, not a possession, something we participate in, rather than own. The ancients seemed to understand this intuitively. Their monuments, their rituals, even their calendars were tuned not to time as measurement, but to time as movement, to cycles, to breath. When we study the great stonework pyramids, Machu Picchu, Baalbek, Sacsayhuaman, or the mysterious polygonal walls that defy conventional explanation, we tend to look for patterns of labor and design. But what if they are also maps of consciousness, physical manifestations of inner geometry? The way a mind harmonized with the earth might express itself not in words, but in shapes, in alignments, in enduring form. Consider for a moment that thought itself may not be confined to the brain. Modern physics hints that all things are entangled, that particles communicate across vast distances instantaneously. Neuroscientists have begun to suggest that consciousness may be a field, not an organ, a pervasive structure of awareness that arises wherever there is sufficient complexity to tune into it. In that sense, perhaps the ancients were not invoking gods. When they built their temples, they were invoking connection. Their monuments were receivers, amplifiers, resonators of mind. Stone, with its crystalline structure and density, is the perfect medium for holding and transmitting vibration. Each surface, each angle, might have been chosen not merely for aesthetic harmony, but for cognitive resonance. When the builders stood within those chambers, surrounded by walls that hummed with certain frequencies, something may have changed within them. Their thoughts may have quieted. Their perception may have deepened. They may have felt themselves part of a living continuum that stretched beyond their single life, beyond their civilization, beyond even humanity. What we call religion may have once been experience, direct, sensory communion with the planet. To enter a temple was not to worship, but to tune, to become still enough to hear the deep rhythm beneath all life. Our modern minds, filled with constant movement, struggle to find that stillness. We measure and analyze but seldom listen. Yet the structures endure, waiting, patient as ever. If consciousness is indeed a shared field, those monuments may still hold traces of the minds that built them. Each block a vessel, saturated with the thought and reverence of generations. Imagine standing before one of these ancient walls at sunrise. The light grazes its surface, revealing tool marks that have survived thousands of years. You press your palm against the stone. It is cool, unyielding, yet alive with texture. Beneath your hand, you feel a faint hum, not literal vibration, but a recognition, the sense that this material has known pressure, heat, time, and yet has not lost its coherence. It stands as witness. In that moment, your breath slows. The boundary between observer and observed softens. For an instant, you and the stone are one, two forms of matter, animated by the same universal rhythm. The difference is only tempo. It is in such moments that we glimpse what the ancients may have lived with daily. A world not divided between animate and inanimate, sacred and mundane, human and natural. Everything was alive, and everything remembered. This idea is not foreign to science. Quantum physicists describe a universe in which observation changes reality, in which particles behave differently when measured. Awareness, in some form, seems to be woven into the fabric of existence. The ancients may have experienced this directly. Without instruments, their temples could be seen as early experiments in consciousness, designed to bridge human awareness with cosmic rhythm. What if the so-called alien technology in ancient stonework was not machinery, but mind, a mastery of resonance and coherence, a civilization that understood how to organize matter so perfectly that it became a reflection of consciousness itself? In modern laboratories, researchers study cymatics, the way vibration creates form. When sound waves pass through a surface covered in fine particles, patterns emerge: circles, spirals, lattice. Change the frequency, and the shape changes. The ancients may have seen these same principles in nature: how sound shapes sand, how wind sculpts dunes, how waves carve stone. They may have realized that everything is music made visible. Their monuments, then, are frozen music. Their patterns are frequencies translated into matter. If we could play them as notes, perhaps they would reveal the tones that once guided their creation. There are whispers among archaeologists of certain chambers that vibrate at frequencies matching the human brain's alpha-theta rhythm, associated with calm awareness and meditative clarity. These spaces, intentionally or not, may have been built to alter consciousness, to align the visitor with the Earth's resonance, known today as the Schumann frequency. We could call this ancient technology if we wished, though it bears little resemblance to our modern idea of machines. It is technology of participation, not control. The ancients didn't force the world to yield its secrets, they entered into accord with it. Perhaps this is why their works endure. Anything created in harmony resists decay. Just as music resonates through generations, their monuments resonate through time. They are living bridges between epochs, reminders of a forgotten art, the art of belonging completely. Even now, as satellites circle the globe and cities expand like constellations of concrete, the old stones wait in silence. They do not accuse or boast. They simply exist, balanced between endurance and erosion, proof that wisdom, once embedded in the world, never truly vanishes. And perhaps that is the quiet message encoded in their geometry, that consciousness is not confined to the skull, nor to the species. It is a property of matter itself. It flows through stars, rivers, cells, and stones alike. We inherit it not as owners, but as participants. To recognize this is to remember that technology and spirituality were never meant to be separate. Both are expressions of the same curiosity, the desire to understand and harmonize with existence. The ancients simply took that understanding deeper, weaving it into every wall and pathway, until even the smallest pebble reflected a cosmos in miniature. If this is true, then alien intelligence, divine presence, and human genius may all describe the same thing: consciousness recognizing itself through form. The stones, the stars, and the mind, all part of a single, self-reflecting pattern. The ancients left us that pattern not to astonish, but to remind, to show that when creation and contemplation move as one, what is built cannot truly die. It remains, humming softly beneath the noise of our age, waiting for ears that remember how to listen. And in the quiet of that listening, perhaps we rediscover what they once knew. That to build in harmony with the earth is to write eternity into matter. That to shape stone with reverence is to give form to the unseen. The builders are gone, yet their awareness endures. Through the hum of quartz, through the weight of basalt, through the light on limestone, consciousness, like vibration, cannot be destroyed. It can only change form. And so the monuments still think, in their own way, not in language, but in resonance. They remember, they wait, they are the earth, dreaming of itself. If the earth dreams, then perhaps we are the part of that dream that has learned to ask questions. Our cities rise and fall, yet beneath their foundations the same stone waits. The same quiet intelligence watches and remembers. Every age builds its world upon older bones. Each civilization, no matter how advanced, walks across the thoughts of the ones before. The ancient builders seemed to understand that stone was not simply material. It was a vessel of awareness. When shaped with intention, it became a kind of recorder, a bridge between the living and the eternal. Each mark, each alignment, was both expression and preservation, a way to speak without words. To walk among those ruins is to feel a presence that does not belong to any one people. It is older than identity, older than memory. It moves through us like wind through hollow rock, a language without sound. Some feel awe, others peace. Few leave untouched. Perhaps that reaction is not emotional alone. Science now knows that human bodies emit faint electromagnetic patterns. So does stone. So does water. When one field touches another, something invisible happens. Resonance, a subtle echo between matter and mind. The ancients might not have measured this, but they felt it. Their monuments were not only for the eyes, they were for the body, the pulse, the breath. The great stones at Baalbek, the terraces of Cusco, the pyramids of Giza all share one strange feature: they endure. They are time made solid. They carry memory forward without depending on language. It is tempting to imagine that their builders had help from beyond the stars, but perhaps the truth is that they were closer to the earth than we are. They worked with the planet's materials as though they were alive, and in doing so, they created harmony that modern design often forgets. Their technology may not have been machines but alignment, precision born of patience and observation, a dialogue with gravity and light. The deeper we study, the more we see patterns that echo across continents, similar cuts in stone, similar astronomical alignments, the same reverence for the sky. It could mean connection through trade and migration, or it could point to something more elemental, a shared understanding that matter itself carries thought, that consciousness does not begin in the brain, but in the very fabric of the world. Each structure, then, becomes a meditation in form, a silent gesture toward balance. The builders may have understood that creation and awareness are not separate acts. They are the same motion viewed from two sides. When we create with harmony, we remember. When we remember, we return to that deep emotion. Over time, this way of knowing receded. Human progress began to move faster than reflection. We learned to build higher, but not always wiser. We measured everything, but listened less. Yet the stones remain. They do not argue or preach. They simply continue, offering the same quiet question. What does it mean to endure? Perhaps that is why so many are drawn back to them, not for proof, but for presence. The stillness that stands beneath all change, the whisper of continuity that hums beneath the noise of time. It reminds us that what we call mystery may simply be memory viewed from a distance. When the wind moves through an ancient corridor, or sunlight strikes a carved surface at the right moment, something invisible aligns. For a brief instant, the world feels whole. Matter, light, and thought seem to breathe together. The same harmony that guided the first builders still exists. It has not vanished. It waits in the spaces we forget to look. The more we learn about vibration and frequency, the more it appears that the universe itself might be musical. Every particle oscillates, every atom hums. The great monuments, in their symmetry and proportion, might be tuned to that same universal rhythm. To stand among them is to step into a scale of being larger than the self. In that sense, ancient stonework could indeed be a kind of technology, not mechanical, but conscious, built to amplify awareness, to steady the human spirit in the presence of vastness. The stones do not seek to dominate nature, they mirror it. They teach that permanence is found not in resistance, but in rhythm. So what if the true technology of the ancients was attention itself? The power to listen so deeply that even rock responds, the ability to shape the world without separation from it. That skill, once learned, may never vanish completely. It lingers in art, in architecture, in the human need to align with beauty. Modern science, too, is beginning to circle back. Quantum theory whispers that observation shapes reality. The act of looking changes what is seen. Perhaps the builders knew this intuitively. They built not to record, but to participate, to keep the dialogue between consciousness and creation alive. If so, their monuments were not messages to gods or aliens. They were mirrors for us, to remind every passing generation that awareness is ancient, that intelligence did not appear suddenly with language, but has always been part of the unfolding universe. Tonight, as you listen, imagine the world beneath its layers of time. The continents once joined, the mountains rising, the seas retreating, humanity still learning to see itself. Among that vastness, hands placed one stone upon another, not to reach heaven, but to remember earth. That memory endures. It waits in the quiet spaces of the mind. It is in the pulse beneath your skin and in the movement of stars. The same intelligence that shaped the first tools still shapes your thoughts. The same patience that carved granite still moves in your breath. You are part of the same story. So as we close this journey, take a moment to listen, not to the words, but to the silence between them. That is where the real message rests. It is where stone becomes thought, and thought returns to stone. The circle continues. Thank you for sharing this quiet exploration through time and mind. If you wish to keep traveling with us, you are warmly invited to subscribe. And before you go, share where and when you are listening from. Morning, night, or somewhere between. It all becomes part of this ongoing memory we share. Until next time, may your thoughts be steady, your spirit calm, and your wonder alive. Good night.